The storm tore through the Texas sky like someone was emptying the heavens over Fredericksburg. Thunder cracked nonstop, and the rain hammered the tin roof of the vineyard barn like thrown rocks. I'm Ethan, 27 years old, hired manager of this small vineyard operation, and I was just about to lock up the storage shed when I heard the horses whinnying from the stables. It wasn't their usual noise, it was panicked, like something was scaring them half to death. My heart tightened. I grabbed a flashlight, bolted out into the downpour, my boots slipping on the mud-slick ground. The beams swept over the stall and then froze. In the dark corner, right next to one of the horses collapsed on its side, there was a woman. She was white, her evening gown caked in mud, hair matted and dripping, lips pale as death. Her legs were bloody, a long gash running from knee to ankle like she'd been dragged over rocks. She slumped against the horse's flank, one hand clutching the fence rail, eyes shut tight but still breathing, shallow, like a flame about to flicker out. I stood there stunned for a second. A woman like this? How the hell did she end up here in the middle of the night, on a vineyard miles from town? I swung the light outward, and my blood ran cold. A few dozen yards away, a luxury car was parked crooked in the mud pit, rear wheels sunk deep like someone had shoved it there on purpose. The door hung open. Headlights glowed dimly. The radio inside was still playing classical music, cutting through the rain like some twisted soundtrack, making the whole scene feel like a nightmare. No one else around. No voices. Just the rain, the horse's ragged breathing, and that disjointed tune. I swallowed hard, knelt beside her. I didn't ask her name, didn't ask what happened. In that moment, all I knew was, if I was a minute slower, she might die right here. I yanked off my shirt, ripped it into strips, and started bandaging her wounds. Rain stung my eyes, but I kept my hands steady. I used the downpour to rinse the blood, wiping mud from her legs. Her skin was so cold it made me shiver just touching it. She groaned faintly. I leaned in closer, my voice urgent. "Listen to me. You have to stay awake. I'll get you inside. Don't fall asleep, okay?" The woman opened her eyes. They were pale blue, hazy with pain. But there was something deeper in them. Not just physical hurt, but a humiliation crushed down to its core. She looked at me, then at my hands wrapping her wounds. She trembled. But it wasn't from the cold. I could tell. It was the shake of someone who'd never been touched with gentleness. And then, between ragged breaths, amid thunder booming like it might shake the earth apart, she whispered something that hit me like a punch to the chest. "My husband has never touched me like this." I froze. My hands hovered midair, just a second. But it felt like the world stopped with me. I stared at her, a sophisticated woman, beautiful, worldly, and clearly from another life. But now she was crumpled at my feet like someone discarded. In that instant, I knew this wasn't just an accident. This was an escape, a secret, a wound that wasn't just on her leg, but carved into her whole existence. Thunder roared again from afar. The horse in the stall jerked hard, kicking its hooves against the wood like a warning of danger. I looked up into the pitch black beyond the vineyard, my heart pounding wildly, and I thought to myself a question that stuck in my throat. If someone did this to her, are they looking for her right now? I scooped her up, holding her tight against my chest, and ran through the rain toward my small wooden cabin. But just as I reached the porch, out in the distance, car lights suddenly flashed through the sheets of rain. Someone was driving into the vineyard. The morning after, the rain had cleared out. Sunlight filtered weakly through the cabin windows, turning the leftover puddles on the porch into golden spots. In my small kitchen, I stood quietly pouring hot tea, glancing at the woman sitting across from me, on the old wooden chair, wrapped in a borrowed sweater, her blonde hair slightly tangled, face pale from exhaustion but still holding that refined edge. Her name was Isabella Harrington, 42 years old. I didn't need to Google it. I'd recognize the last name right away. Harringtons owned one of the biggest vineyard chains in California back in the day. Newspapers had covered their merger with a Spanish firm, and the lavish wedding of the only Harrington heiress to some businessman named Victor Morales. But right now, no one would have pegged her as that golden woman. As I set the steaming cup down, our eyes met. And Isabella started talking. She spoke about a life that seemed picture perfect on the surface. but was really just days spent as a shadow. After her father's sudden death, Isabella, barely in her 30s then, got thrown into a financial whirlwind. Her mom couldn't handle it. Shareholders piled on the pressure. And then Victor, the guy who showed up like a savior, pumped in cash to help, but only if she agreed to one condition: a loveless marriage. Sounds like a plot from some cheap novel, right? Isabella said with a bitter smile. But in her eyes, there was a quiet tear track. For 5 years, she played the wife on paper. No love, no intimacy, not even a gentle touch. Victor controlled everything: bank accounts, where she went, even what she wore to events. The times Isabella tried to leave, he'd threaten lawsuits for damaging the business reputation. A high society woman with no degree, no real backup, she knew she'd get crushed if she stepped wrong. At first, I thought I could endure it, but bit by bit, I vanished from my own life. Isabella's voice got smaller. I can't even remember the last time someone asked if I'd eaten. I went stiff. I glanced at the tea in front of her, then I remembered. Last night, as I got her inside, fired up the stove, dug out some old crackers, and asked, "Are you hungry?" A simple question. But Isabella said that was the first kind word she'd heard in 5 years. When she finished the tea, I got up and grabbed her an old t-shirt and baggy jeans. Isabella changed in the tiny bathroom, then stepped out, towel drying her hair. For the first time in years, she sat on that wooden chair, staring out at the winter bare vineyard, and cried. Not loud, not breaking down. Just silent tears like a cracked vase finally spilling over. I didn't say a word. I just sat across from her, sliding a small cornbread muffin onto the table, the only thing left in the pantry. Isabella looked at me, whispering, "I thought I was already dead until last night." A small radio in the kitchen corner clicked on to some old country tune. Isabella glanced my way, smiling, not the forced kind from galas, but a soft one that stirred something in my chest for the first time in years of silence. And in my head, a thought whispered faintly, maybe. I didn't just stumble into saving a stranger. I saved someone waiting to come back to life. After those days staying at my small vineyard, Isabella wasn't the woman who'd collapsed by the stable in that rain-soaked night anymore. She started waking up early with me, rolling up her sleeves to rake leaves, jotting down notes on seedling care, and learning the schedule for misting and watering. Every time we walked through the rows, she'd bend down and touch the dry vines, like she was reconnecting with memories of her late father. One afternoon, as we sat under the bare branches of an old tree, she turned to me and said, "I don't want to head back right away. I want to understand this place, not as property, but as something in my blood." Back then, I signed away land on paper, but I never really touched the soil. I stayed quiet. In my eyes, Isabella had transformed. She wasn't the aloof socialite or the polished voice from press conferences anymore. Now her hands were dirt-stained, her face had a light tan from the sun, and her eyes warmed a little more with each dawn. But peace didn't last. One midday, while I was out fixing a vine trellis in the corner of the garden, a black Range Rover pulled into the yard. The man who stepped out was Victor. His presence hit like a storm cloud, blotting out the afternoon light. Victor's eyes swept over me like I was just some nameless laborer. But Isabella didn't leave him to his own devices. In the living room, flooded with sunlight, Isabella sat across from Victor. I happened to pass by and overheard it all. Victor's voice was ice cold. "If you go through with the divorce, all you get is your father's old vineyard. The rest, the 53 million, every asset, every project, it's mine." Isabella didn't flinch. She just asked one thing. "That's the last thing you want to take from me, isn't it?" Victor replied, casual as ever. "And that garden boy, what's he got besides hands caked in dirt?" I didn't stick around for more, I backed off. That night, the sky opened up again. In my little wooden cabin, there was a knock, soft but insistent. Isabella stepped inside, hair damp, eyes red-rimmed. I got to my feet, didn't ask a thing. But she jumped right in. "If I choose you, I'll lose it all." Those words, no blame, no wavering, just a raw fact hanging in the air. I swallowed thickly. I moved closer, meeting her eyes head-on. "You know where I come from. My family lost our farm because we couldn't cover the water bills. I know what it's like to have your roots ripped out, how deep that pain cuts. I can't be the one forcing you to pick between love and the life you've built." My voice shook a little. I'm just a young guy with hands that know soil, no claim to anything more. Isabella didn't respond. She just turned and walked out into the silence. And for the first time, I didn't try to stop her. On the table, the rough sketch I'd drawn up for reviving the vineyard for Isabella sat unfinished. Outside, the rain kept pouring, like the world itself was clinging to something on the verge of slipping away. Right after that rainy night, Isabella left. No goodbye, no trace left behind except for the silk scarf forgotten in the kitchen. She headed back to San Francisco, the city of glittering lights, endless deals, and that sparkling loneliness. But this time, she didn't return as some million-dollar wife. She came back as a woman slowly figuring out how to live for real. Meanwhile, me, with a heart that hadn't quite mended, I quietly packed up and left Fredericksburg behind. I ended up at a small vineyard in Oregon doing the basics, watering rows, replacing shade nets, and setting up new stakes. Every night I'd lie on that narrow bunk bed, clutching the unfinished vineyard revival sketch, the one I'd never sent. Under my pillow, that thin silk scarf silently held onto the last whiff of the woman who'd walked away without a word. 6 months slipped by. Isabella started doing things on her own. Grocery shopping, cooking from recipes printed on flower boxes, fiddling with a leaky faucet until it stopped dripping. No more house staff in her apartment, just dust she wiped away herself and quiet nights where no one called her name. She turned down every party invite, handed back her club memberships, sold off all the family shares, even the ones Victor had used as his ultimatum. She held on to just one thing: the vineyard. Not for the inheritance value, but because there she'd felt alive once. That morning, holding the legal divorce papers, Isabella didn't cry. She just picked up her phone and dialed a number, the one she'd once thought about deleting. On the other end, there was the sound of wind whipping through a distant farm. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "I'm not calling to ask if you still love me. I'm calling to say that I am free now, and I want to start over. This time, no masks, no conditions, no assets in the background. I just need to know, if I come back, will you still be there?" Silence. Then, in a breath, choked from someone who'd been left behind too many times, I replied softly, "I've never left." The summer sky blazed bright over the new vineyard. Wind whispered lightly through the freshly planted rows, and somewhere out there, two people, once strangers, were on their way back to each other. Not out of duty, not out of debt, but simply because at last they'd chosen themselves. 18 months later. In the heart of Napa Valley, where grapes ripened sweet under golden sun and wind swept across low terracotta roofs, there was a small wine shop called Hayes Harrington Wines. No big signs, no flashy marketing campaigns, just a rustic wooden building, cozy and inviting, with windows opening out to the vineyard rows behind it. Locals knew the two owners by sight. A black man, 29 years old, with rough hands from years in the dirt and eyes that scanned every corner like he was guarding something priceless. A white woman, 44 years old, who'd stepped down from a world of wealth, now in faded shirts, hair tied back with rubber bands, sitting at the counter with a favorite book. We didn't live under the same roof, but every morning I'd brew a hot cocoa just how she liked it. Extra dark, no sugar, and set it on the old pine table where Isabella always settled in to read at 7:15 sharp. We didn't call each other mine out loud, but when Isabella passed me carrying a crate of bottles, she'd always brush her fingers against my shoulder. Light. Just a second. But enough to let me know this was real. One late fall morning, golden leaves scattered across the back patio. Isabella sat on the worn, cushioned chair, book half open in her lap. Her hand wrapped around the cocoa mug, steam still rising. She looked up at me as I adjusted the crooked sign out front. "I've lost $53 million to get this hand back," she said, half smiling, half reflective, lifting her left hand to tuck a stray hair behind her ear. I paused, turned around. I walked over, took her hand in mine and pressed it to my chest, where my heart beat slow but steady. "And me?" All I need is you touching me like this, and it's enough for a lifetime. No wedding rings, no church ceremony, no contracts, just two people who'd been broken, who'd lost, who'd stopped believing, now sitting side by side in a shop we'd built ourselves from the ruins, a place no one inherited, a love no one orchestrated, and a faith that with enough courage a heart could start over any time.